Hello to everybody who sometimes needs a simple explanation of BDSM terms. It's Beautiful Anonymous. 1 hour, one phone call, no names, no holds barred.
I'd rather go one-on-one. I think it'll be more fun, and I'll get to know you, and you'll get to know me.
Hi everybody, Chris Gethard here. I hope you're thinking about signing up at beautifulanonymous.com for all kinds of great bonus stuff. Who knows? What I do know is that if you're not into the long intros and you want to get right to the phone call, skip about 7 minutes. If you skip about 7 minutes, it puts you right towards the beginning of the phone call. And I hope you enjoy it. Thanks, everybody. Hey, everybody, it's Chris Gethard, and welcome to another episode of Beautiful Anonymous. I feel so lucky to be here today. I feel so lucky to do this show. I feel so lucky to keep building this growing archive, this library of unfiltered human conversation that maybe someday, humanity will be erased from Earth due to who knows what. Asteroid, relentless ignoring of global warming. Who's to say what's going to wipe us out? An addiction to war and divisiveness. Who's to say? And then maybe many millennia from now, another species will arrive from space and they will discover iTunes and they will stumble upon this and they will have a glimpse into what humanity has been like for a number of years in the late 2000s. Hello, aliens of the future. Feel free to enjoy the archive. My name's Chris Gethard, and I'm your host, a guy who just kind of unexpectedly stumbled into what this show is. And there's actually a new version of www.chrisgeth.com, which is my website and has been for a long time. I'm working with this new site. It's really streamlining everything. I'm hoping that you'll go check it out. If you go to chrisgeth.com, it'll redirect you to punchup.live/chrisgethard. And PunchUp is a great new service that a lot of comedians are using to organize their shows and their ticket links and whatnot. And you can go there right now. So if chrisgeth.com doesn't take you there, which it should, punchup.live/chrisgethard. And it'll tell you when I'm coming near you, and it'll show you all my dates, including upcoming dates in Newark, New Jersey, Brooklyn, New York, which is New York, Brooklyn, June 13th. That's a Laughing Together benefit show. It's going to be great. Me, John Marco Cerezi, Christy Cielo, Millie Tamares, Michael Cruz Kane. Great show. Raising money for mental health services in schools. It's going to be awesome. Then I'm touring with Eddie Pepitone in Woodstock, New York, Garwood, New Jersey, Hamden, Connecticut, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Kansas City, Missouri, St. Louis, Missouri, Cudahy, Wisconsin. I think I pronounced it right this time. Ferndale, Michigan, Somerville, Mass, Garwood, New Jersey, Baltimore, Maryland, Hamden, Connecticut. So many good shows out there. You can go get tickets for all those right now. And you can also, if you go to the site, you put in your email address, I believe, it'll let you watch a special I did called Half My Life. I put this out a couple years ago, and you've had to pay for it up until now. And you can go watch it for free at punchup.live/chrisgethard. And I super appreciate anybody who goes and signs up to be informed of when I'm coming to their town. And if I'm not coming to your town, there's also a way you can input that I should come to your town. And enough people say that I should, then I'll go there. And that's a nice, helpful thing. And this is going to be the hub for all my stand-up shows, which all of these shows that I'm currently announcing are stand-up. But in the future, any Beautiful Anonymous touring will also factor through the site. And if you ever want to be informed of if a Beautiful Anonymous live taping is coming near you, you're going to want to go there and be a part of things and check it out and maybe put in your email address to just make it easy for me to inform you when I'm coming to a town near you. That's a good plug. Here's another good plug, beautifulanonymous.com. This gets you extra bonus content every single week. And the people who have signed up are loving it. Things have stalled out. I'm hoping to get to 2,000. We're stalled out at 765. A respectable number, but not huge by anyone's standards. So if you're into it, you can sign up, get extra bonus content at the end of every episode, probably like 15 to 20 minutes extra. And then if you sign up at the higher tier, you also get a once a month taping where only people at that tier get the number. And you also get a follow-up episode with a past classic caller, and it's very good, and I'm proud of it, and I'm psyched. And thank you. So sincerely. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm doing pretty good. I got to get my sleep better. Slept 4 hours last night. I think you can kind of hear that. Got to get it together. Got to work on the health. We all do. Everybody does. Everybody does. And one thing that I'm happy about is a lot of people tell me that Beautiful Anonymous is a show that they like to fall asleep to. And I'm jealous because I'm having sleep issues. And maybe you'll fall asleep to this week's episode. But I bet not, because this one is one that's prone to keeping you awake. It is a really good episode. It comes down to basically this. How many life changes can happen in a short period of time? You're going to hear about who our caller was just a few short years ago. The lifestyle she was raised in, the life she was living. And when you hear who she is today compared to that person, it's kind of unbelievable and shocking to know that that's the same human being. And if it's shocking for me and you, people who are hearing about it, imagine how shocking it's been to live it. And this caller was so charming and so open and so willing to talk about what it is like to go from a life that a lot of people would quote unquote approve of to a life that is, simply put, more true to oneself, whether or not other people have an opinion. I think that's really beautiful. And I will say this. The caller was so open and says there's no such thing as TMI with me. But I think because of that casualness, the conversation felt easy. But I want to put out there, this doesn't sound easy. It sounds tumultuous and shocking. But to hear that the caller gets to where they're at, where they can now speak about it in a way where I go, they made it sound easy when I know it's not. In that sense, it's such a good reminder that living truthfully is incredibly healthy and incredibly important. And I hope everybody out there feels the freedom to find that for themselves in life. Enjoy this call, everybody. I know I did.
Thank you for calling Beautiful Anonymous. A beeping noise will indicate when you are on the show with the host.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. This is this is the shock of my life. I told your producer because I've been, well, not consistently, but I was super religiously listening to the show when it first came on. And, you know, off and on over the years, I've followed you on Twitter, and whenever you tweeted out the phone number, you know, I've tried to get in, and this is the first time, and I was totally not expecting it. So what a surprise.
Well, I'm so glad to have you. I'm psyched it finally worked out.
Yeah, glad to be here.
When did you, I'm not mad about it. Just curious. When did you stop listening? When did we lose you?
It was probably during COVID at some point, because mostly I listened to podcasts in the car, and, you know, when COVID happened, I was doing a lot less driving.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
But also, it's kind of funny too, the timing, because when I was first listening to it religiously, it was something that so I found out about the show through This American Life, and then it was something that my ex-husband and I would listen to all the time, and
that'll do it.
And so it's every possible thing has changed in my life since then, and he would have been the one person that I would have told about this, and we're still on really good terms, but potentially among the things that we could potentially talk about, some of them are going to be things that I just don't need him to know. And so, you know, he's the one person I would have said, hey, look, I finally made it onto the show. And he would have been excited about it and understood it. And now I'm like, no, we're going to keep this completely anonymous.
Do you know if he still listens to the show? Like, did he keep Beautiful Anonymous in the divorce effectively? Or do you think he's fallen off as well?
I have absolutely no idea. I think he mostly listens to Dungeons and Dragons podcasts these days. So.
That's fair. Our producer, Andrea, doesn't play Dungeons and Dragons, but religiously listens to some Dungeons and Dragons podcasts. And I'll tell you, I still listen to Criminal religiously. And then 90% of what I listen to now are podcasts where queer people talk about the X-Men. That's most of what I listen to.
That kind of sounds amazing, actually.
There's a whole subculture of queer-hosted X-Men themed podcasts right now, and they are all brilliant. And I am deeply in love with Queer Lens X-Men podcast verse.
As a queer person myself, which is part of the thing that has changed since 2016, or was it 2016 that the show started?
Yeah. Yeah.
Part of the thing that's changed has been me coming out, and but as somebody who is very queer and very immersed in nerd culture, this actually doesn't surprise me whatsoever that there's so many X-Men podcasts. Like the analogs are perfect, and I can imagine in particular a lot of like trans metaphors.
Oh, queer metaphors, civil rights metaphors, pretty much anyone who's ever been an outsider. And I think shifting more and more in recent years towards some non-binary trans story analogs. And it's great. And then, of course, I also listen to my probably the podcast I listen to the most is actually called Screw It, We're Just Going to Talk About Comics, which is also a comics podcast, but it's not hosted. That one doesn't have queer hosts.
Amazing.
That's just my grumpy friends, Kevin and Will Hines, but also a great podcast. But yes, Cerebro, Best Issue Ever, Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men. These are all brilliant, brilliant podcasts. Anyway, welcome to Beautiful Anonymous, the show where you stop listening and then we talk about other podcasts we like instead.
How meta.
Indeed. Well, it's so good to talk to you. I'm not sure what you want to discuss. You've already put out some things that are very interesting. I don't know how much you want to talk about your life changes, or if there's other things you want to focus on.
Well, okay, so I'm really good at telling like specifically packaged narratives about certain things in my life, and so part of what's appealing to me about having this conversation is going into it with no particular endpoint that I'm trying to get to or no particular theme. So I'm a completely open book, which is part of why I will not tell anybody in my actual life about this, because it will be very identifying if I get into certain details.
Mm-hmm.
And that would defeat the anonymity of it. So I'll just give you like kind of a recap of everything that has changed since, I was first listening to the show all the time. 2016. I was a relative newlywed in a straight marriage. I was pretty devoutly Christian. I was starting to not deconstruct. I don't like that word because it feels like I wasn't that active about it, but I was a Christian. I was becoming more progressive. I was, fairly unaffiliated politically, and so. Everything in my life looked fairly traditional at the time. I had a desk job and everything. And now I am in my mid-30s. I haven't had a desk job in a couple of years because my ADHD made me, which I also wasn't diagnosed with yet at the time. My ADHD, it became clear, was making that just not a thing I was able to do. And I kept getting fired. And I kind of decided, you know what, actually, I love not working at a desk, and I'm going to do anything else I can possibly do. So right now I'm mostly doing pet sitting and then cobbling together all kinds of other random shit. I help paint murals sometimes. I won a Jenga tournament at some point.
Most importantly, I love that you list that amongst all these changes, winning a Jenga tournament. Also right up there. Worth mentioning.
No, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. That was one of my proudest accomplishments in the last year, honestly. Let's see what else. So I'm like opting out of trying to have a traditional job structure whatsoever. I am in seminary. I never, ever, ever thought I was going to go back to school whatsoever after I graduated with my undergrad. But I'm in seminary working towards becoming a hospice chaplain. But interfaith, because I'm no longer Christian, but not in the sense that I don't feel like I specifically walked away from anything, but it's more like the whole world just kept expanding around me. And so I'm just a broadly spiritually curious and enjoying learning things. And I believe spirituality and religion have play very important roles in humanity in general, especially when it comes to confronting our mortality. I am becoming more socialist by the day. I'm polyamorous. Well, I'm technically polyamorous now. I'm only dating one person. But first of all, it's a girl, and she's got other partners, and I could have other partners if I wasn't too lazy to go out and find them. But I definitely went through, a little slut era, which I had been a virgin when I got married. So that was also a big change. And there's probably other things in there too, but there's a lot to go off of already. So I don't know what.
So much.
We can talk about any and all of it. And the concept of too much information doesn't exist in my framework of conversation. So you are welcome to ask about literally anything.
So I guess the first thing I want to know is how do I phrase this? Because it's a question that I have had sometimes when you see radical changes like that, right? This is a radical amount of change in a real short burst of your life. How surprised would 2016 you really be by 2024 you? Or how much would you go?
2016 me would probably be kind of appalled.
Appalled. And you feel that's truthful. So this was not like, because my question is, to go through this amount of radical change, if you go, you would be appalled. Where's that from? Because that denotes that this was all, this doesn't sound then like it was information or something that was in you that you were avoiding. It sounds like it would be shocking to 2016 you if you would be appalled by it, unless you feel like that there was some programming there of some sort. So I want to hear about that.
Well, so I mean, it kind of, yeah, it does sound that way. Literally everything that I've mentioned in this last list, it was all stuff that had been kind of bubbling under the surface for a really, really, really long time. And I don't know, the guys are just broke or something. And like, it was, once one thing started to change, all the rest of it changed too. And that's one thing that I've come to realize about myself that has also kind of become my whole philosophy on the world, is the recognition of just how completely intertwined a lot of things are. So there, if I'm really looking at it, I could go back and I could trace almost all of these changes. I could go back as far as I want to and recognize, oh, here's where that thing started. Oh, there's where that thing started. But really, the first super concrete, I guess, domino that started falling in the series was, I think it was Ferguson. When the Black Lives Matter movement started, and this is such a depressing thing to say, but I don't even remember specifically which shooting happened first, but it was, there's a short time frame in which there was, a lot of really terrible police shootings. And like I said, the Black Lives Matter movement really took off. And it was about during that era that a mentor of mine, who I'd known for years, and who was kind of a spiritual mentor to me in a lot of ways, that person was becoming a lot more racially and socially progressive. And he had a really compelling and informative and understandable way of explaining why we should care about other people. Sorry, I've got a chihuahua here with me. He had a very good way of helping people who were not necessarily predisposed to understanding other people's worldviews. For example, white evangelical Christians like myself, helping to understand in a way that was both challenging but also like digestible why these things mattered. And I started to understand how the power structures of whiteness that are just kind of so deeply baked into American culture in ways that we don't understand. And I started to have a lot more sympathy for the disenfranchisement of Black people in, the 2000s. And, it's not just a thing that died off with the civil rights movement. And so that was really kind of the first thing. And I started learning about, from there, like specifically Black theology, liberation theology. And I had never realized just how much of a difference, up until this, how much of a difference, like racial and cultural background can make in your understanding of, religion, God's relationship to humanity and all that sort of thing. And, all these new frameworks that I was learning were like, oh, wait, this actually makes sense too. This makes at least as much sense of the white theology that I grew up with. And that was kind of a pivotal turning point because I started to become a lot more aware of how many other narratives and ways of making meaning about every possible thing in existence. There's so many other ways of seeing, there's so many other ways of being. And I've always been inclined toward curiosity. But I was raised in a way that was I was kind of raised to be judgmental and to put a lot of pride in being right about everything. And I started finding in myself, oh, you know what? Maybe it's not actually that satisfying to just feel like I have the right answers all the time. It's actually really exhausting to be this drunk on my own smugness all the time. Where once I would have, somebody has a lifestyle or an opinion or whatever that I don't understand, my first reaction is no longer, oh, that's ridiculous or that's stupid or that's wrong. It's, oh, that's interesting. That's very different than how I think about this thing. And I'm curious about knowing more. And so I kept applying more and more of that curiosity to myself, which I've been writing about this in seminary recently. Actually, several things that were intertwined in me are the fact that I am queer, the fact that I have ADHD, and the fact that I'm whatever sort of description you might call me, very spiritually curious, but, can't be tied down to one particular faith tradition. All of those things are like kind of the same thing in me. I really can't pick any one of them apart from the other because they all inform each other. And actually the thing that sort of unlocked those three for me was poetry. I have completely lost my train of thought, but somewhere I was getting at, like, it was, you had asked about the radical change. And it's really, if I'm going to actually like do the distilled version of my answer to that question is just, I learned to practice curiosity. I'd always kind of been, naturally passively curious, and I learned to actually be very intentional about being curious. And my world has become so much more fulfilling and richer and beautiful since I've started doing that.
Now, this awakening being spurred by some of the racial reckoning in America is really inspiring. And I think there's probably a lot of people whose lives changed by a whole lot of factors that were swirling around in those times. It still does break down. I still love a brief timeline of how you go, I'm in a culture that is maybe being dismissive of these protests where I'm actually finding myself very curious. And the more I look into people's experiences that they're putting out there, and then also to hear that you also looked at other people's spirituality, religion, churches, that you looked at specifically, I believe you said Black theology and spirituality as part of it, and going, there's a whole other dialogue there that doesn't bump with my values. And in fact, I don't want to close out. That's really fascinating and beautiful. It's still a pretty wild ride to now I'm divorced and dating a woman in a polycule. So I do want to just hear the brief timeline of how we get we get from like, hey, I think I actually want to step up and be as best an ally as I can figure out how to be to my Black neighbors, to something where I'll save the other comment for later. But yeah, those lifestyle changes don't always go hand in hand. And I see how they can snowball. I just want the brief bullet point of how they snowballed for you.
Okay, so, well, the dating a woman thing was obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but it was the, inevitable outcome probably of me finally having, I guess, the right frameworks for understanding myself and realizing, oh, I'm queer. Oh, and I'm, I am no longer a Christian, and these things, because of these things, it's really not fair to either of us to stay married. First of all, just understanding myself as a queer person rather than a straight person, that didn't necessarily mean that I was going to go out and start pursuing relationships. I did want to go have my little slut era just to explore, I have only ever slept with one person in one way. And I kind of wanted to find out, okay, is it actually that I just don't like having, traditional heterosex, or is it that, and it turned out, yes, indeed, it's sex with the penis doesn't really do anything for me. And it's so much more fulfilling to have queer sex. So I wanted to have the sexuality specific exploration period. I have never been somebody who felt like I was wired to pursue relationships necessarily. Like, growing up and looking at my sisters, the two of them, always imagined being married, having husbands. And I'm a fairly independent person, which is part of why polyamory works for me. Because I would not change my marriage. It was great for what it was. And I think it served both of us in a way that it needed to in that period of our lives. But in general, at this time, I don't see myself ever like cohabitating with somebody anymore. So I love the independence that I have of like, I know that the person that I'm dating has somebody else who's her primary person who, is, the person that she really has her whole life intertwined with. And she and I can just take detours to visit each other's lives. So I kind of like polyamory gives me a lot of freedom in that way. I love her, and it's an absolute joy to support her in any way, but also I really like my solitude. I really like my independence, and I don't see giving that up anytime soon. So all that to say, I was never going to go out and try to find a relationship necessarily. And this is one that kind of just happened. We started, when she and I started talking, like it was really no intention of it becoming anything. We started talking about like writing, because both of us have different kinds of backgrounds as writers. And I was like, oh my God, we think about writing the same way. We were really clicking on that conversation, and we kind of just never stopped talking. And it turned into the most surprising thing of my life. And it just so happened that she was already polyamorous, and I did not know anything I barely knew the word polyamory when I met her. Mm-hmm. And when she was, telling me about her experiences, my initial response was, wow, that's really weird. And I can't imagine doing that. But with, everything else in my life changing and my curiosity, it was partly, the curiosity of, fuck it, let's try this. I don't really say no to a lot of things anymore. And partly just the way I felt about her, I connected with her in a way that I have never, ever connected with anyone else in my life ever. And I don't expect I will connect with anyone else in my life like that ever. And it was like, I can't imagine not being in a relationship with this person. And so if that means learning a completely new way of being in a relationship, then yeah, let's do that. And it's been, not without its learning curves, but it's been beautiful and challenging and amazing. And I've learned so much about myself in ways that I wouldn't have in monogamous relationship structures, which isn't to say that it's a superior relationship structure, but it works really, really well for me personally. And she was a lot more experienced in it and has been an incredibly gracious and understanding presence with me as I've kind of learned to be in this new kind of world that she's in. And yeah, here we are.
I'm very interested, and I don't want to dwell too much on the shock value stuff. I'm not trying to dwell on the lascivious details too much, but it does make me laugh to hear you just say, like, Turns out sex with a penis, not fulfilling for me. And you had been with one guy. So there's a world in which none of these revelations happen, and you'd just be having penis sex, and you would think that's what sex was. But I also have to imagine to go from growing up in what sound, you know, you've described it as not just evangelical Christian, but also you yourself have said a particular culture that where you were raised to judge others, to close out others. To go from that, I have to imagine the first time you're hooking up with a woman. And again, I'm not trying to be gross here. I just find this fascinating. I'm like, there must be so many thoughts in your head of like, I don't know if I'm going to understand how to navigate this woman's body parts or have her navigate mine. But you said that queer sex is so much better.
Like both.
I just want to know what the analogy is. That like you finally like your whole like your sex life was you didn't even realize it was cloudy until the sun came through, or is it like you were listening? Was it like when Bob Dylan went from acoustic to electric? Was it? I have to imagine when you go, oh, there's a whole other type of sex that works for me, and only when I discovered it did I find out that the other type of sex just doesn't work for me, and that's the sex I've been having. That almost sounds like, did you just discover that candy exists when you're like 13 years old and you've only been eating vegetables and someone's like, try candy, check this out, have a soda, you've only had water your whole life, this is fizzy and sweet. Like, to find out that there's good sex in this world and only then retroactively realize that the sex you'd been having wasn't getting you where you needed to go, that must be a pretty shocking experience in a sensory way.
Yeah, no, it totally was in sensory and, you know, a very holistic way. So it wasn't, I didn't go into it like, you know, completely ignorant because, you know, I'm an adult. I was at least sexually progressive enough that I had watched porn off and on since I was a teenager, and should have been a clue that I was only ever interested in girl on girl. So, you know, at least in terms of the basic mechanics of how it was supposed to work, you know, I kind of had an idea, and I'd had fantasies for years. There are two experiences that I've had in my life where I had this long-standing fantasy of what something was going to be like to experience in person, and it exceeded the fantasy. The first time was going to England, and the second time was having lesbian sex, and it was just like, oh my God, like, I get why sex is a big deal to everybody. I had been so like just ambivalent about it. And it was like, you know, it was a thing that we did and had to do and go on with life. And honestly, neither of us were that into it in my marriage. And it was like, it was totally surreal. It's like, I can't believe this is happening. And it's everything that I thought it was going to be and then some. And the other thing too was like the next morning I was like sitting there wondering, like, am I going to feel guilty about this? I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, so to speak. I was waiting to feel convicted because I had been a very guilt prone person all my life, and feeling convicted about things because I being evangelical and being a millennial, I got to grow up with the fever pitch of the purity culture movement. And it was shocking to me how much I did not have to do any work to like overcome guilt and shame once I got there. I think maybe it was just a timing thing that I was already at a point in terms of becoming more open spiritually, ethically, blah, blah, blah. If it had happened sooner, maybe I would have felt more convicted. But like the next morning, I was just sitting there waiting. I'm going to feel bad about this. I'm going to feel bad about this. When is the shame going to set in? And it never did.
Let's pause there. Waiting for the shame to kick in, first of all, sounds like the name of a great album. And it never did. What a beautiful thing. I will say this, no matter what your political views, no matter how you feel about social shifts throughout our lifetime for people who are my age and older, the idea that there's so many people out there discovering that they can let go of shame, what a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. Anyway, I've disrupted the momentum. Let's do some ads. We'll be right back. So happy to tell you about Talkspace, our longest standing advertiser, the biggest supporter of this show over the years, and especially right now, happy to talk about Talkspace because we are in May, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Talkspace is the leading virtual therapy provider and specifically encouraging people right now to talk it out in therapy. And I know there might be people out there who feel like opening up to a therapist is uncomfortable, but guess what? It can also be cathartic. It can be exhausting. It can also be exhilarating. But the one thing that it's certain to do is this. If you keep talking, or maybe even texting in the modern world with a licensed therapist, you're going to gain stuff from it, insights. You're going to uncover truths. You're going to discover things that you can only discover with therapy and people who are trained to help you get there. You can go get some personal breakthroughs and judgment-free support by signing up for Talkspace. Everyone who listens to this show knows that I was just actually talking today with Hallie. She asked me, how long have you been talking to Barb, your therapist? And it's been almost 20 years. I think I added it up. It was 17 years. 17 years with the same therapist. I had other therapists before that too. Changed my life for the positive. And 17 years ago, it wasn't easy. I had to find Barb through back channels, through phone calls to people I trusted, who I knew might have insight into where therapists were. It was scary. It was intimidating. It was stigmatized. And I'm so happy those walls are being torn down. And Talkspace is a forward-thinking platform. It's a huge part of the reason why therapy is becoming so much more accessible, so much less stigmatized. Kudos to them. Maybe you think seeing a therapist or psychiatrist would be helpful, but you don't have the time to actually track someone down, to meet with them. And maybe it's also an expense that's daunting. Well, try Talkspace. They do everything online. It helps cut costs. It makes getting that help easy, very accessible, very affordable. It's actually covered by most major insurers. You can sign up online and get a personalized match with a provider right for you. That usually happens within 48 hours. You can also send messages to your therapist, so you don't even have to wait for your next session, which I am amazed by that, because I remember years ago going, I want to talk about that in therapy. I can't forget that. Do I write it down? Do I have little notes in my pocket? Do I put it on my phone? No, now you can get things on record throughout the week so that your therapist is ready to go, ready to give you the most value when you invest that time. Also keep in mind, if you have specific challenges, Talkspace is the #1 online therapy platform, and they have licensed therapists with over 40 specialties. So whether it's anxiety, depression, maybe you're caught with some substance abuse issues, maybe you have relationship issues, you can find somebody who specializes in those things. Again, it's affordable, it's in network with most major insurers, and it is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's May, and to celebrate May, Mental Health Awareness Month, and the power of talking it out in therapy, Talkspace is offering every listener of this podcast $80 off your first month with the promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com/beautiful. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com/beautiful to get $80 off your first month. Use the code SPACE80, that's SPACE80. Show your support for the show. That's Talkspace.com/beautiful. The code is SPACE80. Thanks to all of our advertisers. Now let's get back to the phone call.
Maybe it was just a timing thing that I was already at a point in terms of becoming more open spiritually, ethically, blah, blah, blah. If it had happened sooner, maybe I would have felt more convicted. But like the next morning, I was just sitting there waiting. I'm going to feel bad about this. I'm going to feel bad about this. When is the shame going to set in? And it never did. And then that continued to be the case with, I had probably like a dozen or so hookups with just randoms in a fairly short period of time, because again, I was trying to find out, I was trying to find out exactly what it was about heterosex that, if it was a, context specific thing or So
you almost did like a scientific method experimentation. You were like, let me go scientific method
I
style.
Totally did. I totally did.
Did you have sex with some more men just to be like, was it just our vibe with my ex, or are there other penises that might get into a rhythm I enjoy? So you did because you have said you had a slutty phase, which everybody probably should have in their life. I had a couple along the way, nothing too crazy, but I went out and you were like, I will try a few penises. We'll see how those go. I'll try some things I have only seen in porn, and we'll see how those go. And just ding, ding, ding for you. You're like, oh, you must be sitting there and go, oh, thank the heavens I tried. because discovering a
Yeah,
more
basically.
fulfilling orgasm is pretty cool, to say the least. That's the most juvenile, the most basic elementary thing I've ever said in 8 years of doing this show. Orgasms are cool. Orgasms are cool, everybody.
Well, I mean, yes, and also that's not even that's not the only thing about it, though. Is like the whole experience for me of having sex with another woman is the whole thing is just there's a degree of connection there, and it's just like understanding and relating to each other.
And those things go hand in hand, obviously, right?
It's so not just about the orgasm.
No, but the connection,
hand in other things, and
yeah, hand in hand and hand in other things. Well done. But yes, they all go hand in hand, right? Like you get to more fulfilling sex, and I'm an idiot going, orgasms are good, but it's like, right, if you feel a certain level of comfort, trust, connection, then naturally it will lead to a climax that feels more fulfilling. Whereas if your sex feels awkward or obligatory or you're ambivalent towards it, yes, those things all dovetail into each other.
Yeah, totally, exactly. And then, so the other thing that I was getting to about the shame with the slut phase is I never experienced that. It was a very interesting thing for me to learn about myself, that I can have casual, random hookups with people whose names I don't remember anymore. And I first of all, I can forget their names. I wouldn't have thought I could do that. You told me in 2016, I was still thinking that every sexual connection, it's this, you're going to form some sort of connection with the person and you're going to have feelings about it. I was like, nope, I can go, hop in and out of bed with somebody and they're a stranger to me and I have absolutely no feelings about it whatsoever, other than that's a data point for one reason or another. So that's, that's useful information. I wouldn't have thought that I was the sort of person who could have casual sex, and it turns out I am.
Right.
And I don't really, make use of this information because, again, I don't, who has the time, who has the energy, but, knowing it's a thing that I can do if I want, that's cool to know about myself.
It is. And I love, what I love about you even saying that is going like, I don't necessarily have the time or the energy to put that into play, but it's a piece of your personality and it's a piece of your parameters and boundaries that just being aware of them, I have to imagine, can only give you a little more self-knowledge and confidence and knowledge on how you navigate the world, which is born out of experience and not ignorance. Yeah. And I love that.
Yeah, I guess, maybe that's kind of the theme of everything is I've just become more aware of possibilities for both myself and for everything else that exists beyond myself. Is there's so much more that's possible than I had ever thought in the particular life that I was living before.
What a cool thing to get to.
And we went from, and along the way I got into kink even. So, life is full of surprises.
And can I ask, you don't have to, again, I'm not asking to dive too, can I ask any particular kinks that you're like, this one got a big thumbs up in 2016, me never would have seen that coming?
Well, first of all, I never would have thought I was a kinky person at all. That was also a surprise to me. I went to it was in June of 2021, when we all had new vaccines and it felt like the world was suddenly going to get safe again. And it happened to coincide with Pride Month. And I found out about a kink demo party and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I'll just go and do some people watching. But I ended up trying a few of the demo stations. So I was like, oh, wait a second. Maybe this is something I might like, as I said earlier, I'm not really saying no to things anymore because stuff I said no to before turns out maybe I should have been saying yes all along. Turns out I'm very into impact. When I first started exploring kink, I thought I never ever would have enjoyed being on the receiving end because I kind of like being on control, and it turns out I've got both in me.
Impact.
I don't know. There's a whole lot.
I've never heard impact. I can guess, but maybe rather than me guessing, I can just ask for clarification.
Right. I love a flogger. I love both, using and receiving it.
This is what I would have guessed. This is amazing.
There's So kink is an incredibly broad world. Like there are things that people do that I like, you would never know. And impact is literally that's like BDSM 101. And I don't know, there's just so many, I don't know, I guess it's just sensory seeking. The thing is, for me, when I first started getting into kink, it was only in the context of like parties and that sort of thing. And there was never a sexual element to it, but I really like the sensory intensity of it. And so it's really anything that's like, really kind of fucking with your senses and, making like the contrast of, you're experiencing something 1 second and then you're experiencing either nothing or something else in the next. Like that's really exciting to me. And I am somebody who has always had trouble getting out of my head and into my body, which is partly an ADHD thing. I now know a lot of it was a purity culture thing.
Well, I want to ask you about
kink
that.
really was a way of getting me into my body.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I want to ask, because you're talking about kink, flogging, and then you brought up purity culture again. I'm going to ask a question. It's been on my mind for a while. It's either a question that I think is going to make you giggle, or you're going to go, this is actually a question that has messed with me over the past few years. It's going to be only one or the other, I would imagine. Maybe both, but definitely not like, oh, I've never thought about it. There's no way.
Yeah.
2016 you said would be appalled. And this also suggests that there's probably a lot of people who knew you in 2016 who would be appalled today. And there's probably people from your past who, if they heard how you're living based on what you said your upbringing was like and your culture was like, would say that like you've been corrupted by Satan. Like that's probably a thing people might say about you if they are from your past and they know about your present. And I'm wondering if you've thought about that and how that feels, because you're still spiritual, you're still religious. You're just not religious in that way. But there's probably people out there going, tisk, tisk, tisk. Did you know that she fell into the grip of the Dark Lord? Like that's a thing people from your past might be saying about you right now.
Oh yeah. Gone off the deep end is the term that other people would have used about people in my situation back in the day, and it's the term I would have used. I think so. At least in my like adulthood as a Christian, people were not. Christianity was almost. We weren't like of the super, intense, the forces of demons and Satan, la la la. Not quite in that area of Christianity anymore at that point, fortunately. And so, I would have thought I, had gone off the deep end looking at me now, but it wouldn't have been like, oh, she has been claimed by Satan and her soul is imprisoned by the devil or whatever. But, definitely knowing I would be subject to judgment. And I'm sure there are people who are. I know who some of them are. It's been interesting to see the responses because actually on the whole, people from my, the before times, so to speak, people have mostly been, a lot more compassionate, I think, than I was expecting. I was totally prepared before I came out and everything. I really thought that I was going to pretty much lose everybody from beforehand. And it turns out I wasn't giving people enough credit for having a sense of compassion. And that's how I would put it. I wouldn't necessarily say that everybody is accepting. Some people have been totally accepting. Some people, I would say, they would probably rather not that I was, having the life experiences that I am now, probably would rather not that I'm making some of the choices that I have, but they've had, at the very least, most of them have had some degree of compassion for the fact that I didn't get to this point easily. It came with a lot of suffering and depression. And
I bet. For as casually as you're speaking now, this doesn't sound like an easy stretch of life, but is there some aunt, some uncle that you were like, oh, this person, their head is going to explode, who's actually been like, cool, go do you? Do you have anybody who really blew your mind with their positivity about it?
I don't know that I'd go that far. I would say it's more of it's kind of just a general, like a very kind of quiet, understated relief and gratitude, I think. Because, honestly, I'm not an absolutist in anything. And so I do not believe that changes, I still don't believe that I hated gay people. And I still don't believe that anybody else I know who's still a Christian, I don't believe that anybody in my personal sphere hates gay people. And I really do believe that there's still a genuine struggle there. I don't expect some of the people in my life to ever fully to love these things about me. But you know, I'm very grateful for the people who are kind of willing to be uncomfortable with it. You know, rather than just like saying, "Oh, we're not going to associate with you anymore." I'm grateful for people who are, you know, I was back in the day, and people who are in my life now, people are genuinely still trying to love the people that they believe are, you know, in sin in some way. You know, I don't think it's as simple as saying, you know, they think homosexuality is a sin and therefore they hate me, and they, you know, I just, that doesn't ring true with my own experiences. I think people are trying to figure out how to love most of the time. And I wouldn't have gotten to this point if everybody I encountered had said, "Oh, you think homosexuality is a sin and you hate people." I'm really lucky in the encounters that I had and the conversations I had where a lot of people were kind of having similar growth trajectories to me, I think, in the ways that we were learning things. I'm lucky that most of my social circle for my adult life has been kind of intellectual, which I don't like. Not to say people have been pretentious, not like, you know, book nerdy, smarter than thou, but people who are thoughtful and very intentionally engaged with trying to think things through. And that's the case for both the people I know who are still in Christianity and the people who are, you know, people like me who have kind of divested from it, and my, you know, more queer, radical, kinky, freaky communities. It's all people who care a lot about thinking through things, even when it's difficult. So I'm, you know, I don't want to dismiss anybody in my life who still has qualms. You know, it's kind of hard and sad sometimes. Like the main thing right now, I think most of my family at this point has, to various degrees of comfort, you know, come to accept, oh, okay, this is her, she's queer, and, you know, she's not married to that person that was part of our family before. And I think most of them have more or less made their peace with that. And the fact that I'm dating somebody and it's a polyamorous relationship, that's the newest thing that everybody knows about and is much harder. And only one person in my family actually asks questions about my relationship. And that's the greatest source of sadness for me at this point, is that, you know, before, when I was, you know, with my husband, you know, anytime we'd talk, to be like, "Oh, how is he doing? And, you know, how is things?" And, you know, he's part of the family. And I think there is one person in my family who will probably want to meet my girlfriend at some point. And the rest of the family kind of just doesn't even ask. And that's just sad, because it just sort of feels like it's a lack of caring about something that's very important to me. But, you know, maybe they'll get there. I am not sure if I answered your question or if I totally rambled off in a different direction.
Listen, you and I have established a vibe where I ask the questions and then you let the kite go. And then at some point the kite string breaks and the kite flies somewhere else. And I just sit back and listen and enjoy it. That's our vibe. I'm going to say this though, for anybody out there listening.
That's the point of the show, right?
Yeah. And listen, I think I think there, over the years, I have to imagine that anybody who has hate in their heart, towards queer people has probably been driven away from listening to this show, and I don't mind that. But if there's anybody out there listening who does feel like they hate gay people, hate queer people, just put this out there. Your life is less cool and fun, because queer people tend to be queer and fun. They're fun and cool. So often, your life has less coolness and fun in it than if you had some queer friends, some gay friends. So step up, be open-minded, and let some fun into your life. Let's pause there. Let's pause right there. That is a fact. That is not subjective. That is objective. Okay, everybody? It's not me trying to be woke. Stop shutting people out from your life. It's not fun. Let the fun in. Let the people in. The people bring the fun. It's not rocket science. Anyway, we'll be right back. Mother's Day is coming up, and maybe you're looking for the perfect gift for the mom in your life. Well, guess what? Aura Frames, I shout to the hilltops. about the Aura frame. I love my Aura frame. We have one on our mantle right when you enter our house. It's one of the first things you see. My parents have 2 of them. My mother-in-law has 1 of them. Our whole family has gotten into the Aura frame, and it's a really great gift for families. And for Mother's Day, you will not go wrong. Killer gift. Really great. They're beautiful Wi-Fi connected digital picture frames. Aura frames allow you to share and display unlimited photos. So, for example, my brother, his son Rory is 17 days younger than Cal. I have the app. My brother has the app. My parents have their frames. I can use the app and just load pictures of Cal onto their frame. My brother does the same thing with my nephew Rory. And then my parents have a frame where without them having to lift a finger, they're just seeing a cycling of new images of their grandkids show up, and they sit there, they get surprised by them. My mom has told me she sometimes will just turn off the TV and just kind of zone out and check out the Aura frame to see what grandkid picture is coming next. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Isn't that a beautiful thing right there? If you're giving an Aura as a gift, by the way, you can even personalize the frame with preloaded photos and memories. I just really love it. My whole family loves it. And I've given them actually as gifts to friends. I have some friends who live down the block. Their first grandkid was just born. I gave them 2 Aura frames because it's I'm not trying to sell it too hard. And you know, I don't do this all the time, but for Aura frames, I will. I sit here, I go, man, the Aura frame legitimately has been a big part of my family's experience with my kid being born. And I kind of can't imagine what it would have been like without it, because everybody loves it so much. My mom in particular loves it so much. From grandmas to new mothers, aunts, friends in your life, every mom loves an Aura frame. It's been named the best digital photo frame by Wirecutter and selected as one of Oprah's favorite things. Aura frames are guaranteed to bring joy to moms of all ages. Right now, Aura has a great deal for Mother's Day. Listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $30 off plus free shipping on their best-selling frame. That's AURA frames.com. Use the code BEAUTIFUL at checkout to save. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks again to all the advertisers who allow this show to happen. Now let's finish off the phone call. Your life has less coolness and fun in it than if you had some queer friends, some gay friends. So step up, be open-minded, and let some fun into your life. I am amazed at the head spinning change. And you mentioned that you're still studying to be a chaplain, I believe.
Yeah, because actually the funny thing is, you know, even as I vaguely alluded to this at some point, even as I've departed from one specific faith tradition, like I said, I didn't feel like I was leaving something. In all of this, it's the case that I never felt like I was intentionally leaving any particular thing. It was just that I got more information and I was like, oh, wow, it's a lot cool if we allow for really diverse plurality in possibilities in all things. And I don't hate Christianity. I hate how some people choose to practice and live out their Christianity, but I don't hate Christianity. I don't hate any religion. I think religion is really fucking cool. Even if we're just talking from like a narrative standpoint, I, like I said, I'm a writer. I love thinking about how people tell narratives, and I love how all the cool different ways that religions can help us all make a narrative, you know, some kind of meaningful narrative out of our experience of the world. And everybody is ultimately trying to tell themselves a story about their own mortality, whether they realize it or not. How I got to the point of realizing I wanted to go into hospice as a chaplain specifically is a whole other thing, but it's, you know, similar to everything else that I've recapped in that actually the factors that led me here were kind of there under the surface the whole time. It is just that there were a few things that culminated in the realization of, oh, this is what I want to do with those things. But I'm really fascinated with mortality, with death as a process, you know, in philosophically, biologically, and I think chaplaincy it's a really good way of being with people in a really significant threshold. And I think spirituality is kind of just like a playground. I think we don't know anything about any of this stuff, and it's really cool to poke around it. Oh, here is different ways that we can tell a story about these things that we will actually never be able to understand. So that's why I'm in seminary and I'm floundering my way through it, because nothing about academia is made for the way that an ADHD brain works. So I'm in C's get degrees mode, but I am doing it, and I'm having a lot of fun, even if it doesn't show on paper, and that's what we're doing.
You're going to be with people as they pass.
Mm-hmm. And with their loved ones who are experiencing that loss as well. And even supporting too the healthcare and social workers, and really supporting everybody who's involved in that transition.
I think that that's such an unexpected part of this life awakening that you've had. And it's really layered to me. And again, it's funny because even though we were talking about it before, I do see the logic of how, okay, getting invested in Black Lives Matter awakens this progressivism in you. The progressivism doesn't create anything, but helps lead you towards being more open-minded towards all sorts of types of people. That helps you eventually embrace your own queerness, your comfort with polyamory. I see how all those things do kind of dovetail culturally into one another, how that's a cultural shift that seems to all be headed in the same direction. At the same time, investing yourself towards chaplaincy, and specifically chaplaincy that leads you to service surrounding death, that one I find, is that something that was always of interest in you, or is that something that also developed in this stretch of life? Because that one, I don't see the dots as easy to connect, and I'm very fascinated by that.
Oh boy. Okay. So that's actually one of the things that I realized is deeply intertwined with the other stuff. So me being queer, me having ADHD, me caring a lot about death are actually all very closely related in ways it would take probably a couple more hours to connect. But short version is on an intellectual level, like I've been curious about like the philosophy of death since I read, I believe it was Marcus Aurelius' fault, reading his Meditations my freshman year of college. That kind of got me philosophically interested in death. And then over the years, I became more interested in, what is the actual, like the practicalities of the dying process within the body. Because a lot of my growth has been investing more in embodiment, physical experiences, both mine and everybody else's. And I think I'm kind of just realizing this right now. I think the way that that it's actually one of the big ways that it's related to the fact that in most ways, I've become a lot more open and curious to all the possible ways that people are different, and how that makes just such an incredibly rich tapestry of existence. But the one thing that everybody has in common, the one and only thing, is that we are all going to die. And I think it's really fascinating to both lean all the way into all the differences from human to human, and also this one thing that is the one common factor that we all have, which is also, even as it's the one thing that we all have in common, it's the only thing that none of us can share our specific experience with somebody else. We're going to die, and the dying person can't, nobody's telling us from the other side, hey, this is what this was like. It's the only place that we're all going completely on our own. And it's kind of, it's a fascinating, like, tension kind of to be in with someone of, I cannot go with you, but I'm also going to be here with you as you go.
It seems, in a way, I'm not sure if you've talked about what you did professionally before your life's great awakening.
Nothing related whatsoever.
It's odd, isn't it? It's odd to hear that you are, by the definition of a lot of the people you grew up with, probably less Christian than ever. But it's also very easy to argue that this side of your life is in many ways more Christian than anything you were doing or would have wound up doing had you stayed in the faith in the exact way you grew up with.
Oh, I know, right? I kind of love that. I've had that thought in almost exactly those words, and I kind of love that about myself.
Yeah, like if anybody ever gives you a hard time, and I'm going to make a joke. I'm not trying to be insensitive, but there's truth to it. Like if anyone from your past ever confronts you and is like, starts giving you shit about aspects of your life, you can be like, yeah, I sleep with women now and I enjoy getting flogged, but I also help people stay comfortable and feel safe and secure as they go through the ultimate end point of life's journey. What are you doing exactly? What are you doing exactly? Judging? Sitting back and judging? Yes, I thought so.
Yeah, no, I think that's hilarious. I don't think almost nobody in my life has really known what to make of the fact that, me at the point that I'm at, I'm going and, pursuing some religious studies. The people who are still religious are like, wait a second, I thought you weren't doing that anymore. And the people who have never been religious are like, wait, you're doing what? And I think it's very funny to be, it's a very queer thing, to always be surprising people and not quite fitting into any sort of expectations.
I love that. I tell you, one thing you probably didn't hear based on when you stopped listening to the show is I did have a stretch where I had a midlife crisis and applied to grad school. And as part of grad school...
Oh, what for?
For social work.
Oh, cool.
I got in, didn't wind up going because I wound up working for a nonprofit mental health organization instead. These are some updates that you've missed. It's all good. I'm not mad at you. But the reason I bring it up is I had to get my college transcript, which I applied at Rutgers, where I also got my BA. So I was like, can you guys just send it to the grad school, the social work grad school? They were like, no, it's a thing where we have to mail it to you and then you have to give it to them. It's whatever. It's policy, legal, blah, blah, blah. So I had to look at my transcript. And I took this class called Death and Dying. And if I remember right, it was a philosophy class. And I remember loving this class. I hated college. And I was like, that class, though, where they all taught us about how different cultures look at death. We watched the movie Akiru, which I talked about on the very first episode of Beautiful Anonymous. It's this really amazing movie about how death shines a spotlight on life. And it's a beautiful film that everyone should watch. Everyone should watch it. And I remember loving this class. And I've actually had the thought, too, where I'm like, man, I really hated college. I had such a hard time. But that class was awesome. I got a C- in the class. I did shitty. I didn't do good. I was shitty in that class. And I remember it so fondly, but I did poorly. Anyway, your recent efforts to help people
That's what my whole
navigate
transcript
death
from seminary is going to look like.
Yeah, you're not crushing it with the grades?
No, I'm in constant conversations with my professors and academic advisors and the dean of academics about, like, I've been on academic probation the whole time I'm there because I really struggle with the submitting things part of it. But like, everybody knows that I love that I'm there and I am very active participating in class and I'm getting a lot out of it. I know that I'm getting out of it what I actually need to. It's just, and the thing is, like, the academic part of it has nothing to do with what actually being a chaplain will look like in practice. So in that sense, I mean, grades are just a formality that
What's it like to be on academic probation as a grown-up?
Care.
What's it like to be a grown-up and get put on academic probation? Like, do you keep a straight face? Are you like, okay, I'll pick up the pace, thank you? Or you just think, yeah, I mean, look, come on, we're going to move forward. How do you deal with that?
I kind of just had to, I just kind of had to laugh. I was like, you know what? I knew I wasn't cut out for academia. I'm only here because I absolutely have to be to get to the thing that I actually want to be doing. So whatever.
That would have been my lot.
If there is a way to become a chaplain without going through school first, that's what I would be doing. But I have to go through the school. And so, oh, well, I will not do it with style, but it will get done.
That's kind of where I landed. I'm able to do a lot of work. That's the type of thing I would have wanted to go get that social work degree for, and I did not need to go to grad school for it. And I'm lucky because I would be a 43-year-old man on academic probation right now and having to navigate that and how to keep a straight face throughout that process. And it would not go well. It would not go well for me. Here's a question.
It would have been a very humbling thing for me if it would have been very humbling if I had had any ego left to humble, but I have been such a dumpster fire of a human being for the last 5-6 years that there was no ego there in the first place. So yeah. I can't, there's nothing left to break.
There you go. That's both a dismal and hopeful way to put it. I'm left wondering, you've talked so much. At one point you even said something that I found really striking. You said something along the lines of how part of queerness for you is being open to possibilities that you didn't used to be open to before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about what the other life changes are that might be coming? Because I would have to imagine part of that is being open to other potential massive life changes. But 5-6 years of a dumpster fire, and it sounds like you've landed on your feet. I mean, you speak so clearly about how all this went down.
No, I haven't. I am not on my feet at all.
You are really good at faking it till you make it then, because you sound so at peace. You sound so at peace. Do you feel like you're still in the middle of the tumultuous part? Are there any other or are there other life changes you're anticipating? Other things you're looking to explore?
Oh, I don't anticipate anything anymore because never in my life, or at least in my adult life, have I anticipated something and then been correct. So me being at peace is me just like I have somewhat been forced to, but also learned to intentionally just kind of accept that everything is so completely out of my control. So yeah, no, I'm not on my feet. I don't know how I'm paying my rent in a few days. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get through seminary when I have failed a few classes. I don't know, hostage chaplaincy is, there's not a lot of full-time jobs. I may end up supplementing with something else. I don't know what that's going to look like. And I have become very okay with having no idea what's going on at any point. I know what I'm doing right this second. I don't know what I'll be doing tomorrow. So, I've learned to, instead of letting myself drown in angst, trying to swim upstream against the current of anxiety, I've just kind of learned to go, well, I have learned and I have been medicated to go, all right, we're just going to float, and wherever the current's going, we're not going to fight it because that's not helpful and that's not getting anywhere, and we'll end up somewhere and we'll figure it out when we get there. And if that connects to, queerness in some way, it probably does. Why a thing that I have often said to people in the last few years is that for me, my definition of queerness is expansiveness. It's allowing for possibilities. Just kind of a sense of humility about you never know what all the possibilities are going to be in anything. And for both, I don't know what is possible for myself. I'm looking forward to continuing to find out over and over again. I'm 34. And I have potentially a whole lot of life left and a whole lot of things that I'm going to find out about. And so does everybody else. Everybody else is going to be continuing to find out about things, and the only thing that I do know is that I will be continuing to practice curiosity, because I've practiced it enough that I don't even really have to try anymore. It's just curiosity is my default setting.
Are there any goals you have right now where you go, okay, like you were just laughing saying, no, I have not landed on my feet at all. Are there any things that you go, if I could nail down this and this, I would feel firmer footing? Or is firmer footing a thing you're just not as interested in anymore?
Kind of both. I'm not, I think I mentioned at some point earlier, I'm not trying to go back to a desk job, partly because, I'm, going into chaplaincy, and I'm not in a desk job currently, and I don't plan to be in the next few years until I get to becoming a chaplain. I've been realizing the last few years I have been by far the most broke and like financially desperate that I've ever been in my life. And yet I am so much happier than I've ever been in my life because money is stressful, but I also have, I have the whole rest of myself that is not being drained trying to, be a corporate worker bee every day. And so I feel more alive. So, so I'm kind of like in terms of financial security and everything, like I wish I would love universal basic income. I wish I knew that every month, if I could guarantee one thing, I wish I could just know for sure that I'm going to be able to pay my bills each month. But beyond that, I don't really need any particular stability in any way. I'm kind of liking this is so early on when I first started realizing that, oh no, I can't call myself a Christian anymore. It was really terrifying because I felt I wasn't used to feeling untethered. And, it feels like it feels really insecure. It feels scary and it's very unknown, but eventually the unknown starts to feel just like freedom and possibilities. And yeah, so that's kind of permeated how I think about pretty much everything.
What a beautiful note to end the general call on. We're going to say goodbye to everybody who's been listening for free. And then caller, if you have a few more minutes, we now do this thing on the show where we have a thing people can sign up at beautifulanonymous.com, and I get to ask you 5 random questions from a list that's generated by our fan base, and we get to know more about you. So we'll say goodbye, and thanks for listening to everybody who's been listening thus far. And for everybody at beautifulanonymous.com, guess what? Now it just belongs to you. Caller, thank you so much for calling and telling us about this explosion of changes in your life. It sounds like it has not been easy, and yet somehow you talk so calmly and casually about it. And I'm super psyched to hear that you're living a life that feels closer to your true self. I think that's amazing. Well done. Thank you to Andrea Quinn for producing the show. Thank you to Shellshag for our theme music. If you want to know more about me, go to chrisgeth.com. Includes my tour dates, and I've got a lot of them coming up. Voicemail number is 973-306-4676. Maybe we record at times that don't work for you. Maybe you have a story and you feel like it's not showing up on the show. I want this to be a place for every type of story I can imagine. So please let us know. We will listen to the voicemails and we will get back to you. You can follow us on Instagram at Beautiful Anonymous Pod. You can join the Facebook group at Beautiful Anonymous, the community. Don't forget about beautifulanonymous.com, where you can get extra bonus content. Thanks so much, everybody. This week on Beautiful Anonymous Plus, here's some of what you'll get from the 5 questions. And what was your best Halloween costume? I was just thinking about some of my childhood Halloween costumes today. And I don't know why, because it's April. Why am I sitting around thinking about Halloween?
I didn't do Halloween. My family was that kind of Christian. We would turn off the porch lights and cover the doorbell and go watch movies in the basement instead. So, because, Halloween was the devil's holiday. And then in college, people would go trick-or-treating in the neighborhood nearby. And it always happened to fall during the time of the semester when I had papers due. And so I couldn't afford the time to go trick-or-treating because I had to finish writing my papers. So I don't have an answer to that one, sadly.
I love Halloween so much. If I grew up in a faith that disallowed Halloween, I would have left the faith when I was 7 years old, because Halloween's the best, and I'm furious. There's other things you probably dealt with in what sounded like a sort of intense and judgmental upbringing that was at least somewhat related to faith that should make me more mad. Hearing that you didn't get to do Halloween as a kid, aka the greatest day in childhood, has me furious. Don't forget to sign up for Beautiful Anonymous Plus at beautifulanonymous.com.
Hey, all you true crime fans, this is Mike Ferguson.
And this is Mike Morphy.
And we'd like to invite you to listen to our podcast, Criminology.
Launched in 2017, we've covered a variety of strange cases from murders to missing persons. Some of the cases are ones you may not have heard of.
Other cases we cover are some of the most historic in true crime. There are 200 episodes of Criminology available to binge on right now, and new episodes come out every Saturday night.
Subscribe to Criminology today, wherever you listen to your podcast.